You're now live.
We are now live, so I'm going to call the committee to order. This is the Senate Finance Committee on February 10th. And today I've kind of called the Abby Shepherd Day. I thought we would just take a quick walk through the bills when we scheduled this last week that had been sent to us in committee, just so we knew basically what they were. Some of them are repeats from last year that didn't get taken up as things kind of crashed and burned about crossover. So, and then, yeah, the miscellaneous tax that we were going to put stuff on, everything fell apart. So Abby is here. Senator Pearson, can you, I know S53 is your bill. Do you want to just tell us why you presented that? Can you?
Yes, I'm glad that. Thank you. I presented it because it's a grave injustice, because I don't think we have an equitable tax policy when it comes to menstrual products that are clearly only used by women. We don't tax some comparable items like adult diapers is the easiest one that jumps to mind. But other products like that are used by men and women, we do not tax. And this is actually being looked at across the nation. I'm aware of some states that are being sued for this as a discrimination issue. And so I think there's a concern that we might be exposed there, and all for a fairly small amount of revenue. I think it's time we update our statutes to make sure we're not treating women unfairly in this small instance of a tax policy.
Okay, thank you. Abby, floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Abby Shepherd, Office of Legislative Counsel. Would you like me to pull up the bill and share my screen with you? Okay, give me just a moment. Okay, everyone should be able to see S53 on the screen now.
Yeah.
Great. So as Senator Pearson laid the framework for this bill, it is exempting feminine hygiene products in Vermont statute. Currently, the sales and use tax applies to all tangible personal property unless there's an explicit exemption. There is no explicit exemption for feminine hygiene products. There have been different interpretations proposed that, for example, the drug exemption, medical supply exemption, or perhaps the clothing exemption could cover these products. Because Vermont is part of the streamlined sales and use tax agreement, most of the states that are members of that agreement have not considered feminine hygiene products to be exempt either as drugs, medical supplies, or clothing. A few years ago, I think it was 2018, the agreement member states did ratify in their agreement an explicit definition of feminine hygiene products and made it clear that member states could either tax or exempt those products. So what this bill does is it takes that streamlined definition and adds it into Vermont statute to exempt those products from sales and use tax. So in the first section, it creates a statutory purpose because this would be considered a tax expenditure because it would be foregone revenue to the state. So it adds a new statutory purpose for feminine hygiene products in order to limit the cost of the goods that are necessary for the health and welfare of the people of Vermont. So that's the first section you see there on page 1. In the second section, it uses the streamlined definition. So it would add the 56 exemption, product exemption to the sales and use tax. Feminine, that's why it starts out as feminine hygiene products. And then it defines it using the streamlined definition, which is Feminine hygiene products means tampons, panty liners, menstrual cups, sanitary napkins, and other similar tangible personal property designed for feminine hygiene in connection with the human menstrual cycle, but does not include grooming and hygiene products, which is already defined in Vermont statute. That includes soaps, cleaning solutions, shampoo, toothpaste, mouthwash, antiperspirants, suntan lotions, and screens. So this new exemption would take effect on July 1st of this year. And that's the extent of the language. And if there are any questions about what this includes and doesn't include, I'd be happy to take those. I think I'm going to stop screen sharing for now.
Okay.
It's also, it is also available on the website.
Okay, committee, any questions at this point? Okay, I've got Senator McDonald and then Senator Hardy.
Is this essentially the same language as the bills you worked on last year?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Are you referring, there were a few different bills. I think this has come up sort of perennially the last few years. But this is using the 2018 definition from the streamlined agreement. So you've probably seen this language before.
Thank you.
Senator Hardy.
Abby, you mentioned I can't remember what it's called, the interstate agreement, what is it, the official name of it?
You can just call it streamlined.
Streamline tax agreement. And you said that it defined these products and then gave states the option of exempting them or not exempting them. Do you know how many states do exempt them or?
So I have information from 2019. I haven't gone through and updated that recently, but in 2019, feminine hygiene products were taxable in 19 streamlined states, and 3, Minnesota, New Jersey, and Nevada, exempted feminine hygiene products using statutory amendments. Nevada did it by a public referendum.
Whoa, okay, thank you.
Great Britain just exempted them from taxation as a nation. Okay, Graham, I see you're there. Do you have a fiscal note on this one yet?
I don't have a fiscal note, but I have an estimate if the committee would like
Okay.
to. We estimate that, so preliminarily, once if this gets moving, committee will write a formal fiscal note, but we estimate this would be foregone revenue of $685,000 in fiscal year 22, staying roughly equal to that going forward. There are currently 15 states, including the District of Columbia, that exempt these products from their sales tax. And then there are further 5 states that don't have a sales tax, period. And so by default, they are exempting it. So $685,000. And that is to the education fund.
Okay. Senator Bray, you have a question?
I think it's more of a comment. Well, there's a question in here. Does this language, so-called feminine hygiene products, do we have to use that because that's what the streamline uses?
That's a great question. I didn't get into the reason why Vermont is a member of the streamlined agreement. That is one of the conditions in order to still be in compliance with the agreement. Vermont is considered a full member state and has been since 2007. One of the important aspects of the streamlined agreement is that it was specifically mentioned in the Supreme Court decision on Wayfair that abrogated the physical presence requirement that was required under COIL for sales tax collection. So it allows, that's what triggered Vermont's remote seller collection law a few years ago. It allows Vermont to collect from certain sellers who don't have a physical presence in the state if they meet a threshold. And the membership within the streamlined agreement was mentioned in that same case as a way of reducing burden on small remote sellers. So it is important for revenue collection for Vermont to be in compliance with this agreement. So if the definition were not used, then there could be questions of Vermont being out of compliance with streamline.
Okay. So then I suppose I wouldn't want to risk putting us out of compliance with Streamline, but just as a language choice, it seems, I'll have to say, sort of prissy or Victorian, this phrase, feminine hygiene products. I don't know if they're male hygiene products or, and the way it comes up, it sometimes when we use hygiene, we're comparing it to cleanliness versus non-cleanliness. So I think there's a strange vibe to the whole thing. And it just seems as though at this point in time, it might be more helpful to everyone to simply say menstrual products, like to call it what it is and stick to that, as opposed to polite workarounds that I think are sort of strange language from another era.
But I
That's
think
it.
we're kind of stuck. We joined Streamline Sales Tax so we could take part in whatever ended up being some kind of an ability to collect from online vendors. And there's a cost. And we may find it again. But that inability to name or define is, we might like to fine tune it.
All right. So I guess just so I really understand, Ms. Shepherd, if we were to change that language, we'd be departing from Streamline. And then who judges whether or not we've departed so far from Streamline that we're no longer considered part of it?
So there is a process within the member states. I don't know how frequently they meet. It's at least, I think they have at least 2 membership meetings a year, and they review compliance. I think it's there's the Department of Taxes, and then I believe there are legislator members as well that represent Vermont. So there is a compliance certification process that the state has to certify that it's in compliance, and then there's a review on the streamlined organization's end. I could go into more detail. I maybe you might want to hear from the tax department about the past reviews that they've been through, but I could get more information on that if you'd like, what the consequences would be. It's not I don't think it's a very rapid process. I think it's a bit of a lengthy discussion, and then there are also votes about whether or not a member is in substantial compliance or insubstantial compliance. It gets very weedy very quickly.
Okay. Well, I guess I was just trying to understand whether or not a modest change like that triggers the whole review, like you're in for an inch, you're in for a mile, or every state has slight variations. And so this kind of checking in, it's, part of 39 different things that Vermont says compared to the others.
And they went to Streamline was because the vendors said, we've got 50 states, all who have a slight variation. I think we may see it more when we get to candy or sugared drinks or I think the question is this an issue you want to pick? Is this the fight you want to pick?
Yeah, probably not, especially now that it seems like it's more troublesome than just an editorial change. Thank you.
Senator Hardy.
Thank you. And Senator Bray, thank you. I certainly cannot speak for everyone who menstruates, but as someone who does, I think that the tax exemption is more meaningful than the language used in our statutes. So I super appreciate that you bring this up, because you're right, it's prissy language, and it would be lovely if we could change it. But I would be happy to co-sign a letter with you if you would like to write to the Streamline Tax Commission, and we could say, can you change this language for everybody? But I think at this point, I would like to advocate for us doing this and not doing it in a way that might hinder our ability to be in this tax agreement.
Okay. Senator McDonald, I think your hand is up.
This is where the French Parliament would shout unanimously, Vive le streamlined.
Okay, I'm gonna move us on. Because these are just walkthroughs. If I don't know that there's any opposition. I haven't heard of anyone that wants to testify. I suppose we should have the tax department in just to tell us if they have a problem, but probably a bill that we can take up and move out without a whole lot of difficulty. Do S54, which Abby, you can walk us through.
Great. I will share my screen as well for this, so you can see that. These are all quite short bills, so I'll try not to stay in screen share for too long. So S54 proposes to extend, so the bill we're just looking at was an exemption. This proposes to carve out part of an exemption so that the sales and use tax would apply to the sale of candy, and the revenue from those sales would be dedicated to support the Child Care Financial Assistance Program. So here we're in the definition of food and food ingredients. So again, sales and use tax applies on all tangible personal property unless there's an exemption. And there's currently an exemption in Vermont law for food and food ingredients. That currently does cover candy. So this language adds candy, you'll see on page 2. So you have a few double negatives here. The subdivision 31 is the exemption for food and food ingredients. The last sentence in that definition, starting on page 2, explains that food and food ingredients does not include alcoholic beverages, tobacco, or soft drinks, and this bill would add candy to that list of what is not considered food and food ingredients. It also defines on line 4, candy, again using the streamlined definition. So candy is a preparation of sugar, honey, or other natural or artificial sweeteners in combination with chocolate, fruits, nuts, or other ingredients or flavorings in the form of bars, drops, or pieces. Candy shall not include any preparation containing flour and shall require no refrigeration. So I looked at their—
Does this rake in maple sugar candy? I
Yes.
believe this is the sword that this bill has fallen on before.
believe that this would include candy. So part of the streamlined process is it allows interested parties to request determinations of whether their products would fall into any of these definitions. And there were several in regards to candy, examples that were given of taxable not necessarily taxable, because streamlined allows the state to choose whether using this definition they tax it or not. So fondue, for example, little fondue wafers, chocolate fondue would be considered candy. Sweetened bars, they're in the form of bars and they have natural or artificial sweeteners, would also be considered candy. Because there is this second sentence that excludes flour and requires no refrigeration, examples of items that would not be considered candy are breakfast cereal or items that contain a flour substitute.
How about maple syrup? It's liquid, so it's not in, right?
It does require it to be a preparation of sugar, honey, or another natural in combination with other ingredients or flavorings in the forms of bars, drops, or pieces. So I'm not sure that the syrup itself would be included.
Yeah, but
as candy.
Maple candy is just maple syrup cooked down. I don't know that there's any other ingredients in there. There might be. I'm thinking of the spun sugar candy. That doesn't have anything in it, I don't think, except maybe water, sugar. But okay.
I
Okay.
think because because the definition does include other natural or artificial sweeteners, that does seem to pull in maple syrup, when it's in combination with the other ingredients.
Okay, but if it's just maple sugar candy,
Mhm.
because you generally don't have fruits, nuts, or other ingredients, it's just maple sugar. That may be, I'm wondering if that gets pulled in here, but at the same time, I'm thinking the spun sugar candy you buy at the fair is also pretty much pure sugar.
Mhm.
So just be interesting to,
I will do a little bit of digging into that. I didn't look at those particular examples. I know there has been a lot of discussion about this in the past, so I'll go back and look at.
there has, mostly around maple.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If you'd like, I can go on to the next few sections.
Yep.
This, unfortunately, so there are some prospective amendments to the same definition that will be taking place March 1st of 2022. So just a technical thing, I had to add the candy exclusion there a second time. So that's what's happening in section 2. It's more of a technical, it's not repealing anything. It's not a sunset. So section 3 explains that this is going into the education fund statute. So it does also provide that one of the uses of sales and use tax can be to, or one of the uses of funds from the education fund can be to support the child care financial assistance program. Because as you see in section 4, it is stated that the intent of the General Assembly is that the amount of revenue raised from eliminating the exemption for candy, so imposing sales tax on candy, the intention is that that revenue be appropriated each year to support the child care financial assistance program, in addition to any other appropriations to that program from any source. And then the effective dates would repeal this, would make this change the exemption go into effect this July. And then you have the accept section 2 for adding in candy a second time on March 1st, 2022 to make that technical change to keep candy as not being considered food or food ingredients. I've stopped screen sharing now.
Okay. Graham, do you have any estimate on this one?
I do, and I prepared a little sheet here. I'm going to see if I can share it. Oh, nope. So there's a document on the committee's webpage. I'm just on my iPad and I realized that it's not sharing properly.
Graham, do you
yeah.
want me to share?
Sure, if you can, Faith.
I don't, I'm in the middle of something. Let me get out and get that document.
Okay. But just to sort of get started here, we estimate this will bring in $3.3 million to the education fund in fiscal year 22. There are currently 19 states that apply the sales tax to candy. And so the way this typically works in states is that it's not spelled out necessarily that we're going to apply the sales tax to candy. It's more sort of a question of whether candy is counted as groceries, and that's the same question, in Vermont, because right now candy is considered a grocery, and therefore is covered by the groceries exemption. And so the question in other states is, so A, are groceries included in your sales tax base? And B, if you exempt them, do you consider candy a part of groceries? And so basically what that lines up to being is that 19 states apply the sales tax to candy, despite the fact whether they have an exemption for groceries or not. Then 29 do not. And then I've indicated on this chart, the ones in blue are streamlined sales tax states. So it looks like there's about 6 or 7, I think is what I counted. 6 or 7 states that use the same streamlined definition as us, and they do tax candy. So all the questions around what is candy, what is not candy, those have appeared to be at least taken in stride in those states as well. So.
Okay, and that would bring about $3.3 million in.
That's
Alright.
correct. Yeah, I did some research into how COVID might impact this. It's somewhat unclear. The driving a lot of the sales in candy are the two major holidays, Halloween being one and Easter being another. And this past year, Halloween did not, despite the fact that people were not going around as much to house, there was still a fair amount of candy bought. So it seems sort of not reasonable to believe that we're going to purchase less candy than we did last year during Halloween. And then the other question was Easter. And again, even compared to when we look at Easter last year, and even though it was early in the pandemic, Easter candy sales held up. So it seems reasonable to believe that the estimate is kind of as it was before, because it's been around, we've been doing this for the past couple of years. It's been around $3 million every single year we've done it.
Okay. Sandra Pearson, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. I'm curious, a couple of questions. How do we treat soda?
Soda, this is similar to the candy, but soda used to be exempt under groceries. It was removed a couple of years ago as a grocery item. So we apply the sales tax to soda.
And what
it's not
about,
just, I was just saying, it's not just soda. It's any, I think the definition is streamlined is stuff with artificial sweeteners in it. So.
yeah. And what about ice cream?
I don't know for sure. My guess is I haven't been made aware of any sort of special treatment for ice cream under the groceries exemption. So I would guess that it is considered exempt under the groceries exemption.
It's a dairy product.
But what if I go buy a creamy at the creamy stand? Is that a sales and use tax or a meals and rooms?
I don't think yeah.
I would guess that that's a prepared food and would be subject to the 9% meals and rooms tax. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to get the
I'm trying to think if we pay sales to 9% if when we go to the creamy stand. So if I'm taking it home, things get confusing. But dairy has been a big one. Not wanting to tax and maple. There's been issues. And and not doing dairy, we got to yogurt covered, whatever. And where was that? These discussions have happened. Okay, so that's candy. The other thing, and Abby, you can correct me, I was told that these removal of the exemptions on both candy and soda cannot be applied to food stamps. Is that correct?
Yes, you're right, Madam Chair. That's correct.
Frequently been put in as trying to discourage people from making bad food choices, but the feds do preempt us from putting any fee, penalty, or tax on anything purchased with whatever we're calling the food stamp card these days. 3 squares.
SNAP.
That is there.
So, Madam Chair, what does that mean? It means that if somebody buys soda with their SNAP benefits, we can't tax it? Is that correct?
That's right. I got a constituent complaint about the woman in front of him had the legendary poor choices, and she gave her card and she didn't pay any sales tax, and he goes through with his bottle of something and he had to pay a sales tax. And how is that happening? So I did check on it, and we cannot, if it is paid for by SNAP, we cannot in any way collect extra revenue from it. I think the feds don't trust us. So, Senator Hardy, you still.
Yes, I had another question, actually, Madam Chair. I don't know if Abby or Graham is the right person to ask this to, but the other part of the bill, the intent language and the language, this is a sales tax, so it would go into the education fund. The CCFAP program is not currently paid for out of the education fund, I don't think. So would this move the entire that program over to the education fund? Would there be a transfer? Would it, is it just this language that's kind of, anyway, would that work?
Right. So in section 3 of the bill, it does add an allowable use from the education fund. So it allows funds to be used to provide appropriations in support of the Child Care Financial Assistance Program. And then the intent language, because you can't bind a future General Assembly, the intent is there saying that the revenues from taxing candy would be appropriated each year to help fund the Child Care Financial Program.
But it doesn't mean that the whole thing couldn't, if with the language in section 3, that alone, that would say that the whole program is funded out of the ed fund. Is that right?
No, it just allows for appropriations from the education fund, but it doesn't change the funding in the actual funds section, because there is a separate fund section for the program.
Okay, so this is just part of a list of what's allowable expenses in the ed fund.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
and this is, I know the governor's budget proposes raising a sales tax on one of the gambling things, Keno, and that wouldn't go into the ed fund. So we've only had the sales tax going into the ed fund for, this is the 3rd year, maybe, 4th, very recently. And we're already starting to pull things out. The ed fund, because so many people seem to go out and buy durable goods with their stimulus checks, which is what they're supposed to, we're pretty flush this year. But that's probably just for this year. We also picked up a $30 million hit from the pensions into the ed fund. So before we start making exemptions to the ed fund, I think we ought to take a look at the big picture and the projections for 3 and 4 years from now. The schools also have millions and millions of dollars in federal aid going in there, and it's starting to look like school budgets are coming in lower this year. But this year is an exception, and I think before we'll look, at 3 years out or so when this windfall money goes away, before we start making any decisions about what money comes in, goes out. And we're going to have to pick up a $30 million hit from the pensions right now. Every year. It was 6.9 and it's now 38.9, something like that. It's over a $30 million hit. So just things to consider. Any other questions at this point on candy? Okay. Then we will move on to S56, and this one is a new one. So Abby, walk us through this one.
I'm going to share my screen again, bear with me. Okay, so S56 is again dealing with an existing exemption to sales and use tax. This exemption that currently exists is for fuels used in a residence. Currently, sales of electricity, oil, gas, and other fuels used in a residence for all domestic use, including heating, are exempt from sales tax. What this bill is trying to clarify is the treatment of wood pellets. This new language that's added in on page 2 makes it clear that wood pellets sold to an individual on the vendor's premises or delivered to an individual's residence shall be presumed to be purchased for residential use and shall be exempt sales under this subdivision. Unless, of course, the vendor knew or ought to have reasonably known that the wood pellets were not purchased for residential use, such as a delivery to a business, for example. Because certificates of exemption are currently required for certain exempt purchases, this makes it clear that such a certificate is not required for these exempt retail sales of wood pellets to an individual. This change would take effect on passage, so it would go into effect immediately. It's really the problem that this bill is trying to address, or when individuals go to a local, say, Guys or Agway to buy bags of wood pellets, and there isn't any way really for the vendor to know whether they are buying it for their individual use or if it's for a business use. And this creates a presumption that when it's an individual going to a store to buy, maybe personally, I do buy wood pellets for my cat litter, for example. I'll go buy three bags of wood pellets. They can presume under this language that would be an exempt sale for residential use. I'm going to stop screen
Oh,
share.
no, I'm starting to feel the bark mulch vibe here. Okay, Senator Pearson.
This is intriguing, Abby, because it's about sort of fairness across the board. But do we tax electricity or natural gas or propane that is delivered to a business?
Okay, that's going to get into the fuel tax as well, because that's a different tax type. And I see Graham is.
I was going to say,
Graham's.
I've worked on this a lot.
Alerted.
If it's so it's there. We have sales tax and we have fuel tax, two different things. The sales tax, if natural gas, electricity, fuel oil is delivered to a residence, then it is exempt. If it is delivered to a business, then it is not exempt. And then for the fuel tax, everyone pays it. So separate tax, there's no exemptions on that. So within the sales tax, which is I think what we're sort of talking about here, if the fuel, whatever it is delivered to a residence, it is exempt under law. If it's delivered to a business, it is not exempt.
But I go down, the Creamy stand sells bags of pellets. I go to Guys. It's not delivered except to my car. So I could be taking it down to my general store and throwing it in the furnace. I get nervous. There were a lot of businesses hit with a lot of fines for bark mulch because they were supposed to know if it was used for agricultural or garden, or flower gardening. And this is the same issue with veterinary supplies. It's putting
Challenge of use-based exemptions.
Yes, it puts the risk on the vendor.
In those cases, those were all resolved after the fact. But that's what
Yeah, but
happens
there
when
was
you
a
come up with new
lot
things.
of pain with people being told they had $300,000 in back taxes.
That's true, but they didn't pay them.
Well, we're
it was the
told
failure
that.
of us to anticipate that before we put things forward.
Putting a tax based on its use has problems. Senator Hardy.
Thank you. Graham, so just to clarify, you distinguish between the sales tax and the fuel tax, which was helpful. Do people currently pay the fuel tax on pellets, on wood pellets? No.
No, the fuel tax is only on like oils, like heating oil, propane, kerosene, dyed diesel fuel, and then there's a rate on electricity, and then there's a rate on natural gas and coal, but not on wood pellets.
Okay, so this, wood pellets are treated differently by both taxes. One in a quote unquote positive way and one in a quote unquote negative way. And in that people currently pay, who use pellets for heat, currently pay sales tax on it, but they don't pay fuel tax on it.
Well, no, if they are, let's say you had a bulk truck delivering pellets to your house to heat your house, that would be exempt under current statute under the residential fuels sales tax exemption. But you would not pay the fuel tax on that. What we're talking about here is if someone goes to the store and buys a bag of pellets, then this bill says presume that is for home residential heating and don't pay the sales tax on it.
Oh, so this is only for the individual bags of pellets. It's not for the truck delivering pellets to your door. The bill.
I mean, I don't know how people buy pellets, but my understanding is that like what we're talking about here is when people go to like Guy's Farm and Yard and they buy pellets, like bags of pellets at retail, and how to treat that for the purposes of the heating or the residential heating exemption, and so this is saying presume that these bags are being used for residential heating and therefore included under the same exemption.
Wow, wouldn't you have to buy a lot of bags of pellets? But okay, but that's helpful. Thanks, Graham.
Senator McDonald.
Which raises the question, Madam Chair, are wood pellets exempted from the fuel tax when sold to a commercial business, or has it simply not been brought up as an issue yet?
So I can maybe jump in there because I have this statutory language in front of me. The fuel tax is on the retail sale of heating oil, propane, kerosene, and other dyed diesel fuel. So it doesn't include wood pellets at all. So it's not an exemption. They're just not part of the base. Whereas for the sales tax treatment, it's sales of electricity, oil, gas, and other fuels used in a residence for all domestic use, including heating. So it's not restricted to heating. And it's also not restricted to those, oil, propane, kerosene. There isn't a.
Thank you. Thank you.
So when my local school gets a delivery of pellets, are they taxed?
Schools are tax exempt. Public
Right,
schools.
so that's that wouldn't be that wouldn't be under this exemption. They would have
Okay.
sales tax.
Okay.
But the private business next door would be taxed.
Yes.
Correct.
And what about Bourne does put it on there in a truck and bring it to you with a hose, bring you wood pellets?
So again, they wouldn't be subject to the fuel tax, but that should be exempt because it's for residential use. So they would be the retailer in that case.
Okay, so that already works. So this is what the bill's trying to, so that's how we treat it when we know you're using it for residential.
Yeah,
heat.
It's exempt.
But if you're putting it in the back of your station wagon, how about cordwood?
That text.
And I mean, in theory, it's all about the use, right? So if you're buying cordwood to heat your home, it should be exempt from sales tax. I don't know what other purpose you'd have for cordwood, but I guess if a business were buying it for the heating of their business, then it would not be exempt. The exemption I believe is just use based. So if it's going to a residential purpose, then it's exempt. If it's not, then it's not exempt.
How about chips?
Chips.
Potato chips?
Chips.
When chips are delivered to schools for heating or to businesses for heating, are they subject to a fuel tax,
They're not subject to the fuel tax. So there's a fuel tax, separate tax that doesn't apply to pellets or anything wood related, even chips. Then there's the sales tax, and I don't know exactly how schools would be treated, but if the chips are being delivered to a business for the purposes of heating, then they would not be covered under the residential fuel exemption.
We'll ask the tax department, but there is this very large heating plant that heats the State House, state buildings, and buildings in downtown Montpelier, and it runs on wood chips. So are we paying? How are they divvying that up? I think we'll ask the tax department that question unless someone knows, but that's a combined, the combined heating plant. So we'll, that has a mix of public and private, or the potential mix. I'm not sure how many businesses. I know we've had churches and town buildings. But I believe that the town buildings do pay the water bill for the town buildings to the water fund. So does the state pay the sales tax to itself on its heating? Be interesting. We'll ask. Senator McDonald.
Just former Senator Greenwood once explained this dilemma by saying that no one had answered the question, how much tax would a wood tax tax if a wood tax would?
I'm probably the only one that remembers Senator Greenwood. But he had a general store across from the Ethan Allen plant. And he was a pleasure to have in committee, Jim. Jim went to AOT. Where did he go when he left us? But yes, I do remember that saying. So anyway, it'll be interesting. We'll take a look at how the state treats wood burning products when the state's burning them and also supplying combined heat to potentially businesses and other municipal buildings. Especially, we should know that because our intent is to see more of that happen. So Senator Hardy.
I don't think the state taxes itself, and I don't think municipalities are taxed for the.
Depends on if it's an enterprise fund in the municipality. If I remember correctly, the city of Montpelier pays a water bill to the water department because it runs as an enterprise fund. And I'm pretty sure that municipal electric departments should be getting paid for the electricity used by the municipality, but we can check on that. That is my recollection, but it's been a number of years.
Yeah, but that's different than a tax. I mean, that they would be paying for the electricity or paying for the water because that's service that they're getting.
But if it is taxed when it's used in a business and we are selling the heat to a business, then is it taxed? Not for the state, but we are selling that heat, that project is available for any business in downtown to hook up to.
Oh, I see what you mean. You're talking about the Montpelier, the heating district or whatever it's called. Okay.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that, I mean, that's just, and there are people that really would like to expand that option. We talked about it with Rygate, and the potential for some kind of a, municipal heating district. So I think we should just ask about the taxes. What happens when it's a combination of municipal, school, and businesses? How are they taxed? Okay. So I was just reading the title of this bill, and it is a lot less extensive than I thought it might be. Graham, do you have an fiscal note on this one?
I have an estimate, a preliminary estimate on
Okay,
this.
that's good.
This is one of those where I read the language and was like, well, you know, this doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but it turns out it might be a sort of bigger deal than we thought. Because
Okay,
my research into this is that the strong majority of pellets that are purchased in bag form. And so it kind of depends on what the current practice is, which I don't quite know. But preliminarily, we have an estimate of about $1 million in foregone revenue from this, because again, the vast majority of pellets that are being bought at retail in bags. And so rather than just simply being delivered by a truck to one's house in bulk. And so to the extent that current retailers are sort of presuming that all of this is being used for residential heat, and they know the rule of law, or they know the law that says that you exempt this if it's going to residential heating, then, you know, it might not be in practice an actual huge revenue loss. But, you know, what I'm sort of highlighting here is that, you know, right now they might just be collecting it because, you know, most items sold at a hardware store would be subject to the sales tax, and they're not sort of delineating whether it's for residential heat or not. And so with the knowledge that we know that most pellets are being sold in bag form at retail, this is sort of the potential revenue impact of this.
okay, Senator Pearson.
Graham, my friend gets a pallet of bagged chips delivered. So they're in bags, they come from a store, but they are delivered to the house. So are you saying that if the business is got its act together, that my friend is not paying sales tax because it's being delivered to their house?
I don't want to necessarily go into specific details, because I do think that
Well,
even though the data shows that a lot is being purchased in bags, it could still be, as you say, being bought in bulk and delivered in bags. And I've made adjustments for that in the estimate, but it seems as though the pellet market in Vermont, most people are buying in bags, and a lot of that is at retail. And so the question is, at the retail level, rather than getting it delivered in bulk like your friend, at the retail level, are they currently, you know, presuming that it's for residential heat purposes and therefore excluding it? Or are they just treating it like any other item at their hardware store that would probably pay the sales tax?
Right.
Our assumption right now is that they're most likely treating it like any other good at their store and taxing it.
Well, actually, my question, I guess, then is for Abby. So if I'm buying it, you know, in a bag from a retailer, but it is being delivered as a pallet to my house, if the retailer is doing it accurately, that I do not get taxed.
Correct. Under current law, it should not be taxed.
Thank you. That's what I was after.
We'll have Senator Perch look in to tell us what the specific issue he does, but I assume it's, I go in, I pick up a bag, I've got a little pellet stove in my, you know, my den that I turn on really cold days or something. And it may depend on how cautious the retailer is. If they got burned on bark mulch, they might be a little more cautious on this one, unless somebody objects. So we'll check on it. I'll have the tax department come in next time we schedule this. But I think I understand what Senator Perchlik is trying to do. I think it, and probably we all like to do it. It's just making sure that we get the wording clear enough so that we don't cause someone pain down the road. So we'll see where that one goes. Senator Bray.
Yeah, so thank you. Just so that finance knows, we're looking at the fuels on, the fees and taxes applied to different fuel types, delivered different ways, and trying to see to what degree they support or don't support our climate and energy goals. And they're a little confusing to work with at the moment. So we might, in the form of the weatherization bill, make a proposal to the committee to try to reorganize them a little bit in terms of proposing taxes that line up with those weatherization goals, for instance.
Okay. Look forward, maybe we can hold this one to attach it to that one, but maybe we'll just kick it out on its own
Sure.
since we don't have a whole lot of bills popping up right now. Okay. We are way ahead of schedule. And we don't have another witness scheduled till 3:15. It is only 2:30. Faith, do we have a rough draft of the agenda for next week we could share with the committee?
I just did it.
Maybe
And
we
we'd
could
be
take a
happy
look
to.
at that and save us. We're trying to find a time right now to have a joint meeting with education to get a briefing on the weighting study. Apparently the House is feeling some pressure to move forward with that. But I'm not sure it'll make it out of Ways and Means. I know that there's some concern that some schools it would be a windfall, for other schools it wouldn't. If schools use the money to provide extra education for those more challenging students, it would be a good thing, but there's nothing that says that schools have to use it to provide extra education or support services. They could use it to buy new football uniforms. So I know that's a concern in Ways and Means. It might never get to us, but the thought is we should at least get a presentation. There seems to be some thought we got a bill last year. I do not remember it. It may have come, like it may have gotten voted out of education the day we all went home. I don't remember seeing it. I know we never had a presentation on it, so it may have been one of those, it was crossover. So it may have been one that came out. I know Senator Hardy, do you know?
Yeah, the bill that came out of education last year related to it would have just asked the Secretary of Education to report back to us in January of 2021 about how he thinks we should implement that weighting study. So we didn't actually get into it, but
Yeah.
I will say that there are ways to implement the weighting study provisions, broadly speaking, that could avoid the scenario that you were talking about. It's all, of course, as it always is, in the details. So there are provisions you can add to tell districts that if they get this additional funding, they have to use it for these purposes, kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see what might or might not come out of the House.
And I think I said this morning when leadership had us in that it was not on my radar. But finance, I gather, gets hooked in because it could cause some major swings in individual towns' tax rates.
Yes.
And again, so we're just trying to set that up. And I know this week and I think next week, I don't think we're going to find time to get it in, but if not, we'll do one the week after, just so we know what it is.
Senator Cummings, I just sent a draft copy of the agenda to the committee.
Okay,
And I can also pull it up on share screen if you prefer.
it might be easier to do it on share screen.
I haven't confirmed all witnesses, so.
Okay.
But let me share my.
Well, it says
screen.
draft, right?
I said it's draft. I don't know that the document says draft.
Okay, this is just what we're looking at next week, and I thought maybe at this point, before it gets set, we have a whole thing on renewable energy REX credits, which will be interesting. And then we have some more testimony on S1. We've also got S1 this week. And then Graham is, okay, this is doing some tax background. The final version of the tax structure committee is out. We're going to do some 101 before we get into that. So Graham's going to walk us through the income tax structure and some of the changes that we've made in there. Faith, can you keep flipping that up? There we go. Housing and Conservation Day. So we're giving them a whole hour. All right, we may have some time there. We've always let them come in and talk to us. And then the annual link up. Okay, this usually goes on the miscellaneous tax bill. I believe this is where we hook our taxes or don't hook them to the federal. So that may play into some of the proposals that are out there, including the PPP. Is that what we're working on there, Faith?
Correct.
Okay.
Abby's shaking her head, yes.
That was, okay, that's the question about this double deductibility of the PPP loans that the Fed said, well, you can't tax the money even if it becomes a grant, but now they're saying you can't tax what I use it for. So I use it to pay salary. Normally that's salary. Anyway, that has come up and we're going to walk through that. And then the other one is we have a place on there for agenda for the next week. We're going to do the transportation right-of-ways that came up. Part of our looking at the whole, we've got some this week, but our whole, how do we tax poles, wires, and it was mentioned that the AOT already taxes or charges a fee for the use of public right-of-ways. So we're going to look at that.
Or does,
And then, yeah. So we know what the groundwork is out there. And then we're back to S60. And hopefully they will have brought us back. And then we're going to have Joyce Manchester walk us through the elements of a high quality tax structure. There are elements that are supposed to be included. I think this might be also part of NCSL recommendations. And then Friday, we're trying to get in that education weighting joint presentation. So that's what we've got for next week. Senator Bray.
I am muted. Do you have a schedule in mind for S1?
I am trying S1. I mean, I'd like, I would
should
like
I
to
explain
finish.
why I asked?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to find out what all the questions were. We're trying to get witnesses in to answer the questions that have come up. But I'd like to either say it's not going or get it out of here. I mean, crossover is coming. So I'd like to have as much base work as I can. I don't know if we'll get the usual flurry of bills right before crossover, but I would like to get that out ASAP.
The question the reason I ask is because we talked a little bit about two things. One, if we were to just start with a pot of $10 million, how might we invest it? And might we choose to invest it differently, acknowledging that we're interested in supporting the wood products industry in that part of the state? And so that led to perhaps having Commissioner Snyder in. I did follow up with Chris Brooks, and we had so I have to call him back. And then once I made sure that he was sort of a helpful witness or could say something on topic, then I was going to pass that information along to Faith. So
Okay.
that was just a thought.
Yeah, no, we've got that. We've asked Commissioner Schneider to talk to us about the economic impact. And I'm finding out where this plant fits in our renewable portfolio, in our renewable supply. And as soon as I find the right person, I will get that person on the agenda that can talk to us about the role it's presently playing, the consequence of abruptly shutting it down or pulling the plug on it. And then maybe there's a possibility of a less than 10-year renewal.
So
I'm not, yeah. So,
Madam,
yes.
so does someone remember when the current 10-year expires?
The current one expires, I believe, next year.
Okay, so one of the options would be, if we're going to pursue what Senator Bray suggested, when there might be an extension of a period of time to look at that carefully, as to whether or not $10 million could be better spent on wood products somewhere else.
Yeah, and or in something else, but it's not like we're going to get 10 million. I mean, no one's handing the state 10 million. This is
No,
reflected in rates.
The ratepayers are handing
Yep.
this company $10 million for providing
Probably
power that
in
can be
$3
purchased
yeah.
$10 million less expensively somewhere else.
Okay, Senator Brock.
I just would like to put on the agenda at some point, and it might be late next week, it might be the beginning of the following week, to begin talking in more depth about broadband and about the 10-year telecommunications plan. There are a lot of moving parts that are in progress right now, including discussions that I've been having with Tim Briglin regarding the bill that the House has. And that bill is in draft right now. It's got a bunch of holes in it. I'm happy to send it out to everyone, but it's by no means finished. I have a conversation this afternoon with Steve Klein again, just to talk about the landscape for potential funding, including what we anticipate from the feds, what we have right now, and based on what we know, what restrictions we have, and also to try to clarify the $3.6 million that's left over from last year as to where that goes. The second thing is I'm having a discussion, I hope soon, with Commissioner Tierney regarding the RFP that they put out, just to see where that stands for broadband. And the big concern there is that I don't think they have enough money to do it and do it right, but we have the RFP is out, and we really, I guess, have to see what, if anything, comes back. And then the last piece is I have a conversation scheduled with the treasurer to talk about, as we look at rebuilding the VTA, of looking what fiscal authority they might have either to bond or to use other funding sources that we haven't thought about, such as venture capital, but to provide an umbrella to be able to do that sort of thing, as well as the applicability of using things like the bond bank as a capital facility for the CUDs. So all of those are moving parts. I got a lot of material that that has been conducted by, or collected rather, by Ledge Counsel, by Maria, regarding how other states have put things together. And I'm in the process of trying to digest that enough to be able to at least have her finish a draft of some kind that could be put forward to the committee as just a place to kick off discussions. And any thoughts that anybody on the committee has that, you know, I should be thinking about or that I've forgotten about, or it should be in there, would be very welcome at this point.
Okay, and I've been waiting for a bill to be a vehicle to work on. I'm trying to get a sense of what power we have. That's, I believe, what's set up for this Friday on not just on the taxing of polls, but if we put public money into lines, and then those lines get sold, do we have any influence in there? Do we have the ability to say, if we give you public money or a tax exemption, that you have to, you know, you have to provide open access? Trying to get a sense of just what authority we have. And then we'll have Steve come in. The 3.2 or 3.6 million is sitting there waiting for an appropriation. If we feel we would like to get that out in something like line, you know, the extensions for individuals, we could suggest that for that next kind of mini CRF bill. But to date, we don't have any additional funds, but it may well come. I've asked if utilities get included in the money to pay arrearages, and was told by Senator Sirotkin, no, but that there is money coming to pay for those. Because as we're hooking folks up, I want to make sure that we're getting them into something where the minute we stop subsidizing, they go away. And you've got some CUDs and stuff who can't stay afloat financially because a percentage of the customer base just basically can't afford the service. So just trying to get a handle on a lot of that. And I see Senator Bray, Senator Hardy, and Senator Brocker. Is that a new hand or an old hand?
No, it's just a continuation. Just to mention that I have asked Maria to answer a number of the questions that you've raised in terms of legal research. She's, I think, farmed some of that out, and I haven't gotten a result back yet, but I've asked those.
We've got her coming in, I believe this week. So Senator Bray, and then Senator Hardy, and then Senator Pearson.
Thank you. So in terms of a few thoughts, one is I like the idea that we got into some, I don't know, slightly tricky waters when we're talking about, well, who would money go to? You know, and we're talking about CUDs versus privates versus other entities performing the service. And I was thinking about it over the weekend. It feels to me like a productive way to go is what you were talking about. You would specify conditions that attach to the money, and any entity that was willing to meet those conditions would make themselves eligible. And so that might be one way, sort of a fair, neutral way of thinking about grants going out. The other thing in terms of that money, Holly Groschner was in and talked to us about a possible
Yep.
expenditure related to supporting their one-on-one counseling to help people connect. And it does seem as though, my impression is, maybe we need more information, but that as we know, we get closer and closer to people having functional connections. But that last one where someone really gets equipment set up, has the right equipment inside, knows how to use it, and makes it usable to themselves or their family, it seemed like a good investment to me at any rate. And I or inclined to support it. And I don't know if we're thinking about making a recommendation to use any of that money to support that consortium or whatever it is that she was recommending to us. And then,
yeah, and again, one of my concerns is that this, if we start paying for connectivity or for paying, people's hookup and for their broadband service, that it's going to be really hard to say, well, the federal money's gone away and we're not subsidizing you anymore. I think we need to know
right,
what future pain or difficult decisions we might be setting ourselves up for. So, and how we're going to pay for that.
right.
So
Can
I
add
bet.
one last quick note. The last thing was VTA, or a new version of the Telecommunications Authority. I know that the House is kicking around different models, outside entities, sort of like the old board, something more akin to the Clean Energy Development Fund, where it's appended to an inside department, wherever they're going. If we end up exploring that, Holly Groschner might be a witness to talk about that, since she was general counsel to it. And Chris Campbell was very informed about how it worked, technically speaking, and running the thing. I know that. Anyway, just stop there. Two witnesses who participated, who might help us see the strengths and weaknesses as it was constituted before.
Okay. Chris
It's
is
Whitaker
on
and-
my list.
This-
Okay. Senator Brock, you faded in and out there on me. So I'm going to go to Senator Hardy and then Senator Pearson. And then we're going to go on our break.
Yeah, and I thank you, Senator Cummings. I have to leave in like 25 seconds because they want
Yes.
Ed. But I just want to say a couple things really quick, and we'll get back to this, I'm sure. First of all, Senator Brock, thank you for all of your work on this. You seem to be very comprehensive in your approach, which is helpful. And I'd love to see your draft and to know how it differs or not from what they're working on in the House. And related to the CRF line extension stuff, it seems to me that we would want to do that sooner rather than later and have it as part of the CRF bill rather than waiting for our bigger package, just because we can address sort of more emergency situations faster. And I had one more point and now I can't remember it because I'm thinking about, I have to leave, but all right. See you all.
Okay. Well, I'll have Faith have the commissioner that should, just come in and give us a briefing on how many line extensions didn't happen because they either ran out of money, and I think it was more they ran out of time, and see what we might be able to get going. Okay, wait, Senator Pearson, your yellow hand went away. Okay.
You mentioned a pot of money sitting there. I thought we had allocated that in maybe budget adjustment. I thought that was the one,
No.
that the money that got reverted because the language in the broadband stuff was particularly strict.
There was money proposed to be reverted, as I understand it, and it's probably as of joint fiscal. And I've asked twice now, there is 3.6 or $2 million that did not get out the door. It was at one of joint fiscal's last meetings we said, we're going to be in session in literally 3 days. leave that money there because we're going to want to spend it in broadband. So it's sitting there, but it can't be expended without legislative
Okay.
approval. So it would go through appropriations, but again, we could make that recommendation. So we'll have the commissioner in to set that up.
Because we did approve some money, but that's separate, you're saying.
There
Okay.
are so many pots of money
Yeah.
floating around.
The other question, and maybe this is also one where I'm confused, but the idea that the Washington Electric Co-op came in around the property tax exemption if they're helping a co-op, if they're helping, excuse me, a CUD. Do we have a bill for that? Is that part
Just
of?
got it. Yes, we
Okay.
got it Tuesday or Friday. It just came in.
Good.
So we have a vehicle.
It's
I just
a
want to make
64
sure that when we do, that we know going in, are we setting ourselves up for other groups coming in and saying, well, how come they're not paying taxes and we are? And what the cost is. And just double check that. I think we all want to do it. I just want to make sure we do it with our eyes open and don't have a oops. Okay. So I do intend to get all of those out. Okay, you're getting 3 extra minutes. I will see you at 3:15. And enjoy. We're going to go off YouTube or live, but probably doesn't hurt to shut off all your audio and video.